Okay, open your Bibles with me to Deuteronomy. We're still just a minute early, but I want to remind you, first off, that next Sunday we'll be having church at 9:30 in the sanctuary because Easter. So we're going to ask you to meet in the chapel, and Dr. Kroll will have a very good teacher for you. The day after Easter, Gail and I are leaving on vacation. I will be gone. We will be gone 2 Sundays, just 2 Sundays. So April 11 and 18, we will not be here, but Dr. Kroll will have a very good teacher for you in the sanctuary, just as usual. So next Sunday in Rose Chapel at 9:30, we move Sunday school up 10 minutes, because of Easter, so we can. We used to have to work really hard at emptying parking lots and refilling them. Now we have lots of good parking, but nonetheless, we do stretch them out just a little bit to give a little bit of time for some who've already been to church to make a space for someone who hasn't been yet. So 8 o'clock first service, 9:30 second service, and Sunday school, and then 11 o'clock in the sanctuary again. So you'll have a teacher in Rose Chapel at 9:30 next Sunday, and in the 2 Sundays following that, here in the sanctuary, you'll have a very good teacher for sure. And I will be back to preach and teach on the 25th of April. We'll be right back here. So we will miss you, but this seemed to be a good time to take our vacation this year. Easter's a little bit earlier than it is sometimes, and we host annual conference here at Boston Avenues. I'll be back, of course, in plenty of time for all of that. So we're going to get through Easter and then take our vacation for this year. All right. Open your Bibles again to Deuteronomy. I think we can finish the highlights of Deuteronomy this morning. I'm even prepared to go on into Joshua if we get that far. And what we're doing, of course, is hitting the highlights this time. Twice, some of you went all the way through the Bible with me, every verse of every chapter. But I'm going through this time and gleaning the parts that I think are the most important, and not apologizing when we skip over. And today you're going to see that we skip several chapters at a time in Deuteronomy that I don't think are so apropos to you and me. But I will deal with the parts that I think are very apropos to you and me and things that you and I need to know. All right? Let's pray. God, this is the day that you have made. This is Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday through all Christendom, as you know so very well. And we pray that all of us, from the smallest of churches to the greatest of cathedrals, are lifting high our Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, that the palm branches really do mean something significant to us, that Palm Sunday experience, and all the events that took place in such a short few days immediately following. Help us now as we turn to the book of Deuteronomy, that we find here things about you and about us that are forever true. We offer our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, I was ready to begin at chapter 11, verse 13. If you'll turn with me there. Okay, quick reminder, if you didn't make it out in the snow last week, Deuteronomy was written, we believe, in the 8th century before the Common Era. The first time it's mentioned was during the reign of King Josiah, 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 and this was about the year 721. About 721. In the sermon, if you haven't been yet, you will hear me mention Amos in the sermon this morning. Even though it comes from Mark, we believe Mark and the other gospel writers pick up on Amos with the part about it getting dark at noontime. Amos said, "On the day of the Lord, the sun shall be blackened at the noontime." So the judgment. Amos preached to the northern kingdom under Jeroboam II, begging them to renew covenant with the Lord. He said, "You sell your poor for a bag of silver. You sell your poor and weak for a pair of sandals." God has put a plumb line along Israel and has found that none of you are perpendicular. None of you are truly straight. All of you have erred and fallen short of the glory of God. Let justice roll down, and so on. You remember the words of Amos. And a part of that is On the day of the Lord, the sun shall be blackened at noontime of judgment. Well, the northern tribes didn't really take that seriously. They didn't listen, pay much attention to Amos. They went through 4 miserable decades of injustice, of unrighteousness, of worshiping the pagan gods of fertility, and judgment came in the form of the Assyrians. And the Assyrians so obliterated the 10 northern tribes, absorbed them into their culture, so that even today we speak of the lost tribes of Israel. Those 10 in the north that were called Israel, the 2 in the south were called Judah. Okay. So, the Deuteronomists, we believe, whose names we do not know, priests in Jerusalem, saw this devastation in the north, and became convinced that God would judge the South in the same way if there was not significant reform. And so one morning they rushed into Josiah, the king of the South in Judah, saying, "Last night we were cleaning out one of the closets in the temple, and look what we found. A 5th scroll of Moses. Up to this time we have 4. Okay, we have Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus. Now we have Deuteronomy." And later, I told you, when there were more Jews who spoke and read Greek than spoke and read Hebrew, and they translated their scriptures down in northernmost Africa, is where that translation took place, the Septuagint, then they called it the second rendering of the law, Deuteronomos, second time around. So Deuteronomy is much like Exodus, but it's a different interpretation. Josiah believed, okay, this is something from Moses that we've uncovered here after almost 500 years since Moses' death. We need to take this seriously. Okay, chapter 11, verse 13. "If you will only heed His every commandment that I'm commanding you today," and here we have something very similar again to the Shema, that commandment that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount was the most important commandment of all. It's restated here, almost similar words to what we had last week. "Loving the I am who I am, your Elohim, and serving Him with all your heart and with all your soul, then He will give you rain for your land in its season." Remember, the old gods and goddesses of fertility were based on the agricultural cycle. I mean, they had stories about how their gods would go to sleep in the summertime, and because the gods were asleep, no rain fell. And in the fall, they had a big rip-snorting party. The pagans had this huge harvest festival. Too much drinking, too much eating, too much sex with anybody who was willing. I mean, it was orgy all around. And finally bringing in their king on a throne, lifted on their shoulders. "Behold our king, he is our God." The Jews who were faithful, doing just the opposite, having Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That is a time of penitence, a time of introspection, a time of confession, a time of fasting, not eating, and then the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, when we are set at one, set right with God once more. So the pagans believed that their partying woke up the gods, and they could tell they're awake because they could hear them: thunder, lightning, rain. Now, you and I know it rained because it was fall. I mean, that's the way the climate works in the Middle East. You have all the rain in about 5 months, and then you have none for 7 months. But they had come up with all these fictitious stories about how that happened. So the promise is here. You don't have to turn to Baal and Ashtoreth and all these other false gods and goddesses of fertility. If you will do the Shema, God will send you rain. Okay, that's what this is all about. Then He will give you the rain for your land in its season. It isn't going to rain in July. Get over that. In Israel, it isn't going to rain in July. But when it's time to rain, God will send rain. The early rain and the later rain. And you will gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil, and He will give grass in your fields for your livestock, and you will eat your fill. Take care, or you will be seduced into turning away, serving other Elohim, and worshiping them, for then the anger of the Lord will be kindled. Notice here again, the word kindling. That's the way they built fires. So, anger, remember, was fire in the nose. That's the Hebrew derivation of the word. It's about fire in the nose. So God's anger gets kindled against you, and He will shut up the heavens so that there will be no rain, and the land will yield no fruit. Then you will perish quickly off the good land that Yahweh, the I Am, who I Am, is giving you. You shall put these words of mine in your heart and soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand. I told you again, you can see some of the Hasidim. If you get to go to Israel next February, you will see some at the Western Wall where they nod back and forth and say their prayers. Some will have leather straps bound around their hands, and they will have these little boxes that contain the Shema. Those who take all of this very literally, they literally have it bound on their hands. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. You will see a few that have the little tiny boxes, again wrapped with leather straps right on their forehead, so that God's Word is ever before their eyes. This is not what Rabbi Sherman does. This is not what Rabbi Mark Fitzerman does, but it is what ultra-conservative Orthodox Jews do. Okay? Teach them to your children, talking about them when you're at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise up. What? You are responsible for the religious education of your kids. Write them on the doorposts of your house. I've told you, even in American-owned hotels like the Hilton, and we've stayed in the Hyatt Regency in Jerusalem and so on, there will be a little metal tube screwed into the door facing. When you unlock the door, look, it'll be there, and inside it is a little tiny scroll with the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, He is one. You must have no other God but Him. You must love Him with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Okay, so those who take it literally, and I've told you, they're not a majority in Israel. They are a minority. But there's so many religious parties that for Netanyahu and his predecessors, they have to pull different groups together to get a majority. And so this minority has more power than it really ought to have. Because somebody needs their group to move left or right to make a government. All right. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be multiplied in the land that Yahweh swore to your ancestors to give them as long as the heavens are above the earth. Now, that's almost the same that we've read before. So what do we have here? We have the Deuteronomists repeating themselves and saying the very, very similar things over and over and over. Why? Hoping King Josiah will get it in his head. Surely he cannot miss the message they're trying to deliver to him, and he will lead the people in meaningful reform. He did get it for a few years, and then, like people who have heart attacks, they're really frightened the first few months, maybe a year or two, and then the treadmill starts collecting cobwebs if you're not careful. All right, let's skip chapter 15. Go over to 15. I promise, we're just trying to do highlights. Verse 7. If there is among you anyone in need, a member of your community in any of your towns within the land that the I Am who I Am, your Elohim, is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your needy neighbor. You should rather open your hand. I just thought that was so good. Needed not to pass by. Skip to chapter 18. We really are just doing highlights. Chapter 18. Now remember, both Jewish scholars, and I'm talking again about our friends in Tulsa, your friends and mine, we don't have the Hasidim here. We have Temple Israel, which is Reformed, And we have Congregation B'nai Amunah, which is conservative. But neither is Orthodox. Okay, neither. So, B'nai Amunah is a little more conservative than Temple Israel, but neither of them would be on the really conservative side of things. So both of them, you were to go to the libraries or the bookstores, and they both have wonderful bookstores open to you and me. I've bought books from Temple Israel because Reform Judaism is even closer to us than conservative Judaism. So I've bought books out of the bookstore at Temple Israel. Some of the professors now who went to seminary with Charles Sherman, one of his favorite friends was Rabbi Gunter Plaut, and Gunter Plaut has written some really good commentaries, and I've bought several of his books from Charles's bookstore there. And when we were invited to have dinner in the Sherman home on Friday night before Rabbi Zimmerman began here, he spoke at Temple Israel that night, and before that service we were in their home, and the two of these rabbis had not seen each other in quite some time, and they were talking about Gunter Plaut. And I thought, I have his books. I have his books at my own place. Okay, their understanding of how these Torah scrolls got put together are the same as ours. Okay. You ask Rabbi Sherman or Rabbi Fitzgerman, for that matter, their scholarship would say, Moses didn't write these scrolls. Didn't. Traditionally, they've called them 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th book of Moses. But they know now Moses didn't write them. Okay. So this is being written to King Josiah, and of course others in his regime, and they've become, this book of Deuteronomy, important to all of us as well. But not all of it is binding upon us. Paul told us that. Okay, Paul tells us that in the New Testament. He worked out an agreement, he said, with Jesus' own brother James in Jerusalem, that these Gentiles coming into the faith community didn't have to be circumcised for religious purposes, and you don't have to eat kosher. Okay, so I'm just trying to lift up the parts that are appropriate to you and me. Chapter 18, verse 15. The Lord, and again it might mean the I am who I am, I will be who I will be, your Elohim, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own people. You shall heed such a prophet. Okay, Moses is trying to prepare, and here the Deuteronomists understand the importance of a successor. There's got to be a successor. Pick up where Moses finally will leave off. Moses too will die. This is what you requested of Yahweh your Elohim at Horeb. And remember, I've told you that one of the differences between J and E sources is that one calls the holy mountain Sinai and one calls it Horeb. That's one of the differences. This is a part of that faith community that called it Horeb. It's Sinai, same mountain. On the day of the assembly, when you said, if I hear the voice of Yahweh my Elohim any more or ever again see this great fire, I will die. Remember when God came down from the mountain and Moses threw the tablets down and broke them into pieces, and the fire was really kindled in his nose. Then Yahweh replied to me, this is Moses supposedly speaking, remember, they are right in what they have said. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their own people. I will put my words in the mouth of the prophet who shall speak to them everything that I command. Anyone who does not heed the words that the prophet shall speak in my name, I myself will hold accountable. But any prophet who speaks in the name of other Elohim, or who presumes to speak in my name a word that I have not commanded the prophet to speak, that prophet shall die. So, today, as long ago, which prophets do you believe? And every so often I see on television that somebody's riding into Tulsa from somewhere we have no idea where, who's going to be at one of the hotels here and tell you all you ever want to know about the end time. And I tell you, this is the same as going to New York City and having a guy with a trench coat throw back the sides and say, would you like to buy a Rolex for $19.95? I'm amazed that these people must get enough money that they still travel all around the country telling you what the Bible means. So we've always got prophets. But even those who stay in town are preaching very different things in Tulsa on Sunday mornings. Very different things. And you have to be careful. And I don't know how to say this more than I've said it to you. When I go to see a doctor, I don't ascribe to the old saw of, well, as long as they're sincere. Is that what you're looking for when you go to a doctor? Sincerity? I mean, the voodoos in Haiti are very sincere when they drip chicken blood on you. No, sincerity is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking on the walls to see, where did she go to college, medical school, do residency? That's what I want to know. My dentist too. Where did this person go to college? What dental school? It's important to me. I want to know, where did this person go to school? Where did he or she get the training and background? Is this board certified person or not? I mean, having a son now and a daughter-in-law who are board certified, I know what that entails. Our Janet first was in her residency, became a doctor of internal medicine, and became board certified. You have to take this elaborate set of exams, written exams, then oral exams as well. Then she decided she wanted to specialize a little further and become a nephrologist. So she spent 2 more years in residency doing nothing but kidneys. When she was studying for those board exams, Jason said to her, "How tough can this be? 2 little organs this big." Well, guess what? It's now been 10 years since she was board certified in internal medicine, and she was notified it's been 10 years. We have to do that all over again, those exams, if you want to keep that board certification. She said, "I want to keep that board certification." So every time you see her, there's a book in front. Once again, you got to take all those exams. That's what I want to know when I go to a physician. Is he or she board certified? Where'd they go to school? And then we turn our Bible teaching over to, I'm amazed at some of the women's groups in this city and some of the men's groups in this city that are being taught by people who have no seminary training whatsoever. Enough said. Okay, chapter 19. I lifted this up just because Gail and I had an example of this a few years ago. Chapter 19, verse 14. I came home from work one day and Gail said, "Our neighbor has poured concrete on our property, the church's property, the parsonage." And I went outside quickly, and surely enough, they had set little frames and poured concrete to build them a little storage building, tool shed, for their lawnmower and so on. So the workmen were still troweling this thing off, and I said, "Stop, immediately." And they looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "You're on our property." "Well, this is where she told us to put it." And I said, "Well, she is wrong. Let me show you something." And I walked right over and pulled the grass back, and there was the little pipe, the marker, when that neighborhood was first laid out. And so they said, "Sorry, we'll check this out." And they went to her house. I called the chair of our trustees, told him what had happened. He's an attorney. He knew our next door neighbor. And so he came over very quickly. And I led him out there and showed him the little concrete slab. And then I went over and pulled the grass back. And the pipe was gone. It was gone. Our neighbor had told the workmen to pull it out of the ground. So, verse 14. You must not move your neighbor's boundary marker, set up by former generations on the property that will be allotted to you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. Well, it took us a little while to get it straightened out, and our neighbors didn't speak to us, but they didn't finish the little building either. And they pouted about, not getting to put their little building on our property and their lawnmowers and so on. And then after about a year, one day, they were out there, and some guys were jackhammering it up, and they took the little slab away. So the church got its property back, but we had to have it resurveyed, and our lawyer sent their lawyer a bill for that had to be resurveyed, and a new pipe put down right where the old one was, that they were on our property. Okay, verse 15. I think this is also apropos. And one of the reasons I'm reading it to you today is that in the Gospels, when it talks about Jesus' resurrection and so on, you'll find that some of the Gospel writers want to be very clear that there are two witnesses. Even on the road to Emmaus, there were two. Okay, verse 15 says, "A single witness shall not suffice to convict a person of any crime or wrongdoing in connection with any offense that may be committed. Only on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses shall such a charge be sustained." So whether it's good news or bad, 2 witnesses better than 1. 3 better than 2. Look at verse 21 there. If you've wondered just where this appears in the Bible, there it is. Show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. But let me say that this was really a step forward in the way justice was meted out in that day. Because in that day, often if you stole something, they'd kill you. And the Jews were at least saying, if someone takes your eye, all you have a right to do is take his eye. If someone cuts off your hand, all you have the right to do is cut off his hand. That's what it's really saying. What's fair is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But after Israel was refounded, 1947, and has had so many problems with its neighbors, their motto has become, "You hit me, I will hit you harder. If you hit me, I will hit you harder. Don't hit me." Okay, let's go on. We're going to skip a bunch here. I told you, promised you. We're going to go quicker this time. I'm going all the way to chapter 30. The rest of that I don't think is really of great significance to you and me. So let's go to chapter 30. Remember, this is being written a long time after Moses. It's being written as if it's in the time of Moses, but it's 500 years later. So many of the things that are being talked about here, that if they should happen, have happened. They have happened. Listen, chapter 30. When all these things have happened to you, the blessings and the curses that I've set before you, and the blessings and cursings are basically an attempt to try to help Israel understand, if you make good decisions, good things happen. If you make bad decisions, bad things happen. You don't do bad thing, and have a good outcome. So, if you honor your covenant with God, and if you do those commandments that have to do with your relationship with others, there are blessings in your life. If you do not have faith in the one true God, that then manifests itself in doing good to others, but instead you violate one or more of those commandments, there's a curse in your life. There is consequence. There is pain in your life. Okay, that's what blessings and cursings are all about. When Jesus preached, Matthew says, he began the Sermon on the Mount with blessings. Blessed are those who, blessed are those. We call them the Beatitudes. Good things happen when you do good things. If you do the same old things the same old way, you get the same old results. All right, let's go on. When all these things have happened to you, the blessings and the curses that I've set before you, if you call them to mind among all the nations where Yahweh your Elohim has driven you, and you see in Moses' time they weren't being driven anywhere else, but since Moses' time they have been dispersed. The northern tribes have been decimated and scattered all through the Assyrian Empire. And you return to Yahweh your Elohim, and you and your children obey Him with all your heart and with all your soul, just as I'm commanding you today, then Yahweh your Elohim will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you, gathering you again from all the peoples among whom Yahweh your Elohim has scattered you. Even if you are exiled to the ends of the world, from there Yahweh your Elohim will gather you, and from there He will bring you back. Yahweh your Elohim will bring you into the land that your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it. He will make you more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. Moreover, Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your heart. That expression is used in prophets of the 8th century. The great prophets of that time. When you talk of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Okay. The Deuteronomists are picking up on that language. I mean, they've known about circumcising their little boys when they're 8 days old, but more important, to circumcise your heart, to do the will of God, the heart of your descendants, so that you will love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul, in order that you may live. You got to do the Shema. You got to do the Shema. All right, let's skip to verse 15. Chapter 30, verse 15. See, I've set before you today life and prosperity, or death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the I am who I am, your Elohim, that I'm commanding you today, and then in case you've forgotten, he spells it out again, by loving Yahweh your Elohim, walking in His ways, observing His commandments, decrees, and ordinances. Remember, the 10 have grown to 453. Then you shall live and become numerous, and Yahweh your Elohim will bless you in the land that you're entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other Elohim and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. And remember, they've done that 500 years before this gets written. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death. Okay? John in his gospel says, light and dark. Got to make a choice. Life on the one hand, death on the other. Blessings come with life. Curses come with death. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving Yahweh your Elohim, obeying Him and holding fast to Him. For that means life to you, and length of days, so that you may live in the land that Yahweh swore to give to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Need I mention all the others? The Deuteronomists are saying. Okay, this is one of the better known passages in Deuteronomy. And in effect, when I make telephone calls every week, I'm trying to help people understand. You choose life or death. You choose light, you choose dark. You choose God's way or you don't choose God's way. And so many say, I'll think about it. I'll think about it. Chapter 31, verse 14. All right, we're very near the end of Deuteronomy now. Okay, so these authors, even though they're writing 500 years later, are going to give their take on how Moses died and why. 31, verse 14. Yahweh said to Moses, your time to die is near. Call Joshua and present yourselves, It means you and Joshua in the tent of meeting. Remember, Moses had been told when all the people have pitched their tents in circle, try to ward off an enemy. There's one tent just outside. That's the presence of God. That's where you come when you really need to talk to me, Moses. So Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tent of meeting, and Yahweh appeared at the tent in a pillar of cloud. Remember, God comes with a cloud-like experience. So in some religious groups you have the little incense. Okay? The pillar of cloud. You drive back the forces of evil and clear a space for God. The pillar of cloud stood at the entrance to the temple. Okay, you can skip to the tent, sorry. Skip down to verse 23. Just highlights. Then Yahweh commissioned Joshua, son of Nun, and said, "Be strong and bold, for you shall bring the Israelites into the land that I promised them. I will be with you." Now stop and think about it. When God first appeared in the land of ancient modern-day Iraq, at a little bitty place called Ur in the Chaldean mountains, He said to this old man and this old woman, Abraham and Sarah, "How would you like to have a baby? How would you like for this son I'm going to give you to found a new nation?" We would love it. Okay, roll up your bed, pack up your tent, come with me. I will be with you. That's the promise. And it was a promise to Moses. Get on the road back to Egypt. I'll be with you. You don't know how many warriors Pharaoh has, how many charioteers. Oh, yes, I do. I'll be with you. Get on the road. All right, let's skip to chapter 32, verse 48. On that very day, Yahweh addressed Moses as follows: "Ascend this mountain of the Abiram, Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Israelites for a possession. You shall die there on the mountain, Nebo, that you ascend, and shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor, and was gathered to his kin, because both of you broke faith with me among the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, by failing to maintain my holiness among the Israelites. Although you may view the land from a distance, you shall not enter it, the land that I'm giving to the Israelites." Okay, let me remind you what he's just told you, what he's told Moses here. All right. Rabbi Zimmerman told you that Moses and the children of Israel stayed here, not so far from Egypt, for 38 years. Didn't move often. Stayed pretty much here. Others believe they were in the Sinai desert over here, not the Negev here. This is the Mediterranean. But all agree that sooner or later they made a swing out this way and came in like so. Came in across the Jordan at Jericho, which is believed by archaeologists and anthropologists to be the longest continuous settlement on our planet. There were people before those who lived in Jericho, but they haven't maintained the same place as long as the people of Jericho. All right? So this is a very significant place. Sea of Galilee, freshwater lake, Jordan River, Dead Sea, boom, Jericho, West Bank. You read in the papers every day, West Bank. And Jericho is under the authority now of Arabs, Palestinians, not Jews. They're approaching this way. All right, another thing to remember is that when we get to the time of King David, we will read about Naomi and her husband and 2 sons, who, when it didn't rain here, crossed over the Jordan to Moab. All right, so everybody's agreeing the territory controlled by a tribe called Moabites, right here, Jericho, just across the river, and Moses and his people are coming from the east, and he climbs up on a mountain called Nebo. Not the Alps, not the Rockies, a hill. He climbs up on Mount Nebo. All right, and God said, look across the river. You're not going to cross, but you can look. Okay, go to chapter 34. Yes, Richard?
Just to clarify for me,
okay.
The northern tribes had been dispersed at this time.
No, not at Moses' time. They have by the time Deuteronomy gets written, but not the time that's being described. At this point, all 12 are still together. All 12 are coming in together.
Was there ever an estimate of what the total number was?
Scholars have estimated. The question is, do we know how many people crossed the Jordan at that point? And, of course, anthropologists have said you couldn't have had thousands and thousands of people surviving in the desert. Even if you had manna, you couldn't have had thousands and thousands. That it was a much smaller group than the biblical writers lead you to believe. They talked almost like children about numbers, and the biggest number they knew was 1,000. They didn't have millions, and they didn't have zillions and all this thing. 1,000, that was as big as they had. So thousands, zillions, gazillions, or whatever. Yeah, most scholars think not so many, descendants of 12 tribes. Okay, chapter 34 picks up again. We've had this final blessing on Israel. This is a poem in chapter 33. It's a long poem, and you can read it as you will. We've done it before, but it's not the most important thing to you and me now. Let's go to chapter 34. So, Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, and there's a hill right next to it. Scholars are not positive about just which one is which, but they have one they've named Nebo and Pisgah. There was a little Methodist church not far from where I grew up called Pisgah, named here. To the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho, we certainly know where that is. And Yahweh showed him the whole land. Now, what we have here are descriptions that have not been made yet. The territories are about to be listed according to the 12 tribes and the way that land was divvied up. The tribe of Dan and the tribe of this and so on. That hasn't happened yet. But it has happened by the time the Deuteronomists write. They know how the divisions took place. So I'll just run through it with you quickly here. Show them the whole land. Gilead, as far as Dan. Okay. Gilead, we know. It's right up here. It's north of the Moabite territory. Remember, one of the tribes decided, we like it better on the east side than the west side. We'll stay on the east side. And so Dan, tribe of Dan, settled up here. Gilead, we know, is right here. Remember when Absalom rebels against his father David and succeeds in routing his father out of the royal palace? David and his troops go down one of the wadis out of the hills, cross the river, and into Gilead. All right. And if Absalom, scholars say, if Absalom had followed his dad that night with all of his troops, probably could have killed him. He would have been king. You remember what his advisor told him? No, you've got to show the people that you really are your father's son. You sleep with all of his women. Sleep with all of his women, then we go get him. Okay, that sounds great to Absalom. That's what he did. And by the time he got across the river, David had solidified his forces. And here was the terrible battle. And Absalom, of course, gets hung in a tree. And Joab, David's commander, sees if we get rid of Absalom, war's over. Everybody gets to go home to wife and kids. So they kill Absalom, and then we have, is there a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul? Remember? Okay. Gilead, right here. So Moses has climbed up on a hill, right here somewhere. And again, there is a hill there, they'll tell you. That's Nemo, that's Pisgah, and looking over. All the way up through Gilead, all the way up to Dan. All right. All Naphtali, that's one of the 12, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, he's just clicking them off, here are the Deuteronomies. All the land of Judah, that would become the southernmost tribes as far as the western sea. And what would be the western sea? The Mediterranean, sure, the Mediterranean. The Negev, down here, so he can, look all the way over here, that's 50 miles. All the way down here. That's what's being described. And the plain, he goes on to tell you, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees. I remember that the first time we saw Jericho was the day, our very first visit to Israel, we went from Jerusalem down to Masada, which is on the Dead Sea here. There's a road down this way. And that's the way we went. And we went up Masada and we had lunch at En-Gedi. And those who wanted to swim a little while in the Dead Sea could do that. See how the saline content in the water would buoy you up and so on. All right. Then everybody was exhausted. It's middle of the afternoon. It's 105 degrees. The bus is nice and cool, air conditioned. But we get up here, and he comes in from the back side of Jericho and says, all right, everybody off the bus. It's 105 degrees. The bus is 70 degrees. But everybody gets off. And he makes us walk up this dusty little hill, and boom, the palm trees. The palm trees along the Jordan. And then I understood Jericho is the city of palms. It has water. Good water, fresh water. Not salt water. Fresh water, palm trees, watermelon. I've never tasted better watermelon than that hot afternoon. Cantaloupe and so on. Things when you have water. Okay. City of palm trees, as far as Zoar. And Yahweh said to him, this is the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I've let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over here. Then Moses, the servant of Yahweh, died there in the land of Moab at Yahweh's command. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Bet Peor, but no one knows his burial place to this day. You picking up anything here? This is not written by Moses. To this day, we don't know where he was buried. It's been 500 years. Josiah didn't catch that. Doesn't catch it. But here, those who are writing betray the fact it's been a long time. We still don't know where he was buried. Our very first trip to Israel, when we had a sergeant major for our guide, and on one of those hot afternoons, on a very nice, cool bus, he suddenly asked, who wants to see Moses' tomb? And people started waiting, oh, why do I do? And then he laughed, because we should have known. Nobody knows where Moses is buried. Still don't. To this day, they don't know. Okay. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired. And his vigor, and here they mean he was still sexually a man. His vigor had not abated. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. You got to wipe your eyes and get on with it. So Joshua, son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him, and the Israelites obeyed him, doing as Yahweh had commanded Moses. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom Yahweh knew face to face. He was unequal for all the signs and wonders that Yahweh sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all of the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. And Rabbi Zimmerman told you that he has climbed up Mount Nebo. I think he said 6 times, didn't he? 5 or 6 times. That he's climbed to the highestmost part on a really clear day, and you can't see all that God said Moses could see. Can't see it. So what was God saying? I'm going to let you see it in your heart, Moses. In your heart. And then Rabbi Zimmerman quoted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. the night before he was assassinated in Memphis. I may not get there with you, he said, but I've seen the other side. I've seen it. And you will get there. You will get there. Okay, that's what Moses was saying. My children, my grandchildren will cross the river. They will inherit what was promised to us by Abraham and Sarah. Do you see why Jews fight for the land? Okay. Now the Muslims believe just as strongly it's their land, and we Christians decided somewhere back there it sort of belonged to us too. But that's why you have all the squabbles about it. And the movie Exodus was, "This land is mine. God gave this land to me," the song says. All right. Okay, it's 10:30. We finished Deuteronomy. We did it much faster this time, didn't we? We did. We've done 5 scrolls here in about 5 months. It's been about 5 months, so we're moving right along. Turn to Joshua with me. We've got 10 more minutes. Let's don't waste any. Turn to Joshua. Chapter 1. I'm going to read a good bit of the first of Joshua, not all, but a good bit of it, because it's important to get us oriented here as to what takes place next. After the death of Moses, the servant of the I am who I am, Yahweh spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, "My servant Moses is dead." Now, as with kings, you say, "The king is dead, long live the king," and they mean the new king. You change. You just have to move on. We do this in the Methodist Church. There's a moving day every June. Bishop Hayes and his cabinet are already making appointments. Those appointments will not take effect until the Thursday following annual conference. That's the day. And so you have annual conference, and this year it's supposed to be over on a Wednesday afternoon at 5 o'clock, if all goes well. And the people who are moving have 7 days to get ready. Pack it up. And the way it's supposed to work in the Methodist Church is one pastor moves out before noon, and the second one moves in afternoon. Same day. King is dead. Long live the king. Okay. So, that's what's being said here. Joshua, we've got to go on here. "My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all this people, to the land that I'm giving to them, to the Israelites. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you as I promised to Moses." Look at the last part of verse 5. "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you." Notice what he tells him. "Be strong and courageous." Now that's going to get repeated and then repeated again. Be strong and courageous. Just remember that our word courageous comes from a French word, courage, heart. We have a similar word in English, to be heartened or to be disheartened. To have your heart removed, if you would. Your heart's not in it, we say. Your heart's not in it. All right? Okay, these words get carried from one language to another because we all know that experience. When you're heartened and when you're disheartened. When you have courage and you don't have courage. So this is a big step. Can we take this land God's promised us or not? Be bold and courageous. Let me tell you a story. Some of you have heard this. It's absolutely true. Some of you knew Armand Bost very well. I told you that Bishop Paul Milhouse was the bishop here 30 years ago, and he was an old German, an old evangelical United Brethren bishop when we joined with the Evangelical United Brethren in 1968, and the Methodist Church became the United Methodist Church. We took that one word from their name, United Methodist Church. He was already a bishop, so that was a part of the agreement. He would be a bishop in the United Methodist Church, and he was sent to Oklahoma. He was here 12 years, had 12 years left before retirement. So he arrived in 68, and my appointment was the last one he made, 1980. The very last one he made. He was retiring September the 1st. He called me right at the end of July, a couple of weeks after Dr. John Russell had become Bishop John Russell, and offered me this church. But he said, we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. If I hear that you've crossed the Red River before the moving date I give you, I will nullify this appointment. Are we clear about that? I do not want them to see you till you walk into the pulpit. I said, I understand. We had never, ever seen this church. Didn't know anybody in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had no friends here, no family here. Either of us, Gail or me. None. All right. When finally that day came that he gave me, he said, Bishop Russell has earned the right to have this next month before he officially takes over in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's being sent to Lake Junaluska to be trained as a bishop. And then when he gets back to Tulsa, they're going to have parties and teas and dinners and things. And so you stay out of the way. You don't come till the day I tell you. So that day came, and it just turned out that I had been asked months before to address all the public school teachers, administrators of Beaumont Public Schools to try to charge up their battery their first day of in-service. And I told Gail, hey, I might as well do this. Go ahead and do what I've told them I'd do before we leave. So I spoke to all those teachers and administrators at 9 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock, we loaded 3 little children in 2 cars and started to Tulsa. More than 500 miles. When we got here, it was dark. Stopped at a service station, asked for directions. Guy told me how to get to the church. So we drove up. It was a Thursday night in August. Nothing was happening here. Every door was locked. Couldn't get in. We walked all around. The kids ran round and round. They'd been in the car for, 10, 12 hours. They ran all around, couldn't find a door open. And finally, we had a phone number, a fellow named Carl Leonard, and we called Mr. Leonard, who was chair of the board, and he asked, where are you? And we told him, and he told us how to get to the parsonage. So we found our way there. There he was. He unlocked the front door for us, and we went in and slept. The next morning, Mr. Bost had made it clear, he was chair of the Pastor Parish Relation Committee, that he wanted to show us the church. And he would be at our house at 9 o'clock. At the parsonage. So we got up, and Gail was going to wait for the moving van to arrive, and I was going to get the kids in school. We'd asked Mr. Leonard the night before. He had lived in the neighborhood. Where do our kids go to school? So he had told us, okay, your youngest, Jason, will go to Barnard, and your 2 other ones will go to Edison Middle School. Okay. So I rushed to both schools, as fast as I could, and got all 3 kids in school. I rushed home, and Mr. Boss drove up, 9:15. He drove us down to the church and parked over here and started up the north steps. He wanted to do this very dramatically, I could tell. We climbed up the north steps. Mr. Boss was not very tall, but he retired from military service, a full colonel, and he still walked like a colonel. He got about halfway up the steps and turned. He was about 2 steps ahead of Gail and me, so that put him looking me right in the eye. He turned and looked me right in the eye, and then he said, he went down the list of the 9 people on that Pastor Parish Relations Committee, whom I'd not met yet. Walt Helmrich is really busy running Helmrich Pain Drilling Company, and Dan Rogers is really busy running running a law office, and this one is busy running an insurance business, and I'm really busy running Midwest Company and selling all this Caterpillar equipment and so on. We asked our bishop for somebody who could run this church, and he said, "You're the one." Now, hell, son, we can tolerate a few mistakes, but lead us somewhere. Did he not, Gail? That's what he said. And I said, I will do my best. And we marched on up the steps. Well, when I read what was being said to Joshua, I said, hey, I've been there. I've been there. Be strong and courageous. Well, we're going to have to stop there. All right. Now, next Sunday, remember, Rose Chapel. Then 2 Sundays here, but not with me, not with Gail. Then we'll be back on that Sunday, April 25. And we'll probably just start Joshua over again because we just read a few verses. All right. Don't rush off if you hadn't been to church. We have orchestra and we have bells and choir. It's going to be great. Lots of palm branches.